So hello and welcome to the Child and Strengths Domain 0 to 5 question and answer lunch and learn presentation. So this lunch and learn is designed, what we're going to cover basically, this is it's designed for care managers and supervisors that are working in the health home serving children process to really hone your skills and advance your ability to accurately and efficiently complete the CANS New York. We're going to be exploring the Child Strengths Domain 0 to 5, specifically for the younger kids, the tool for the younger kids. We're going to discuss and practice approaches for gathering information. We're also going to review rating strategies and give you sort of an idea of what it's going to be like to really try to be successful with care management staff in completing this specific domain. We're also going to end our day, our hour together with some practice. We'll have a practice vignette that we're going to cover as well. So I do have a couple more folks coming in. I'm going to admit everyone before I get into my formal introductions. So we'll do that right now. All right, give folks a second. Give me a thumbs up or a yes if you can see my slides advancing. Okay, thank you. All right, so what I would like to do at this point, okay. So what I'm going to do at this point is a basic introduction. My name is Brandon Howlett, and I work with the CANS New York Technical Assistance Institute. I'm a senior policy analyst for the Institute, and I work with the John Prade Foundation as well. I live and work in the state of New York, although my employer is not in the state of New York. I work very, very closely with care managers, supervisors, as well as super users, CANS coaches, and the CANS regional leads. And so a lot of that work is directly geared towards assistance and support for you all. I have about 20 plus years of experience in the field, mostly working with children and families, either coordinating services in a community-based setting or providing those services in a community-based setting. As I'm sort of giving my spiel, I would like for you guys to write in the chat box what it is that you hope to gain from today. I'm going to give some basic ground rules about what you can expect, but go ahead and put in the chat box what it is that you expect to gain from today's session. And I'll use that as I see it fit for contextualizing our content. So just a couple of heads up, we are utilizing Zoom. Sometimes Zoom can be tricky. In the event that I get knocked off, this happened to me 5 times yesterday. So it's, there's a possibility. In the event that that happens, don't run away, just hang out for a while. I will be right back. It could take me 5 or 6 minutes to get back on, but that's okay. If the same thing happens to you, if you're knocked off of the call, I'll just sign back in. I'll see you in the waiting room and I'll let you in as soon as possible. So that's sort of it in terms of what you can expect from our platform. I think at this stage in the game, most of us are pretty familiar with how Zoom works. If you're not familiar with how Zoom works, feel free to ask a question and we'll get you oriented and comfortable. So in terms of our engagement for this morning, engagement is going to be absolutely critical to the work that we do. I typically like to make these lunch and learns more of a conversation as opposed to a training. And so I would encourage you to use the chat box, or if it's not too early in your region of the state, to turn your camera on, use your microphone, okay? Don't be shy. I think it makes the process a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. The last thing that I would like to do is 2 things. One, I want to introduce or send a shout out to one of our regional leads, our CANS New York Technical Assistance Regional Lead from Western New York, Mrs. Barry Wexler. I want to thank her for all of the time and effort that she put into this content. She is our resident expert in early childhood development. So a lot of work went into this from her, and she'll sort of hang out and answer some questions from you guys as well. So thank you, Barry, for being here, and thank you for all the work that you did with us. Okay, so in the chat box, I would also like you to please indicate your position. What it is that you do. If you're a care manager, you can type CM. If you're a care manager supervisor, CMS, or other, you can write other. How long you've worked with children and families. and which version of the Cans New York you typically use the most, either the 0 to 5 or the 6 to 21. I'll give you a moment to do that as I scroll through the chats to be more accurate with the cans. Okay, so this is in regard to what it is that you all hope to gain from today. Enhance knowledge on using the cans, learning approaches to completing the cans based on the needs of the client. Excellent, knowledge enhancement. So I'm hoping to be able to cover all of those things in this short 1 hour. Okay, Nicole, care manager, 8 years with children and families, but only this year using the cans. So which version of the cans are you using, Nicole? Just let me know in the chat box. Nurse evaluator, 6 to 21 mostly. Okay, 6 to 21, 6 to 21, 1 month. Okay, Nicole says 6 to 21. Is there anyone on the call thus far who uses the 0 to 5 version exclusively? Exclusively 0 to 5. You can type in the chat box no if that's a no for you. I have 1 child, 0 to 5. No, 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 no. Okay. So it seems like, CS says no. Okay, Chris, thank you. Most of our experience with this tool is in the 6 to 21 version. So I'm hoping that you take a lot away from this, from this presentation this morning. So let's jump into our learning objectives for this morning. Our learning objectives. What we want to accomplish, we want to establish some basic understandings, right? So our goal is, again, is to enhance your understanding of the 0 to 5 version of the CANS, but more specifically, the child strengths domain. We want to increase your skill and your focus on accuracy and efficiency with this particular domain. So what we're going to cover specifically, we'll specifically talk about what useful strengths may look like for this age group, for the 0 to 5 age group. We're also going to take some time to discuss some tips for completing the 0 to 5 child strengths domain accurately and efficiently. And then we'll develop some skills for applying those strengths that we've identified within the population. All right, so we're gonna basically illustrate, demonstrate, and then practice, right? So that's our typical flow. We'll show you what it is, and then we sort of do it. Any questions about what our format is? Any questions about our learning objectives? I think that our learning objectives for the morning should cover the majority of what it is that folks have written into the chat box about what they hope to get from this morning. So any questions thus far? Again, thank you all for being here. It's bright and early, and we have the majority of our folks already into the session, so that's great. Okay, so what is a strength? What exactly is it? All right, so strengths can either be a personal characteristic or an environmental characteristic. So a personal characteristic is an internal trait which sometimes shows up in an individual personality or sometimes in that individual's patterns of behavior. And very young kids, including infants as well as toddlers, you probably have heard of temperament, the word temperament being used, right? I have a 2-year-old, terrible twos. Temperament's a thing in my house at the moment. So a young child's temperament can be used by a caregiver to describe a number of different things, right? Temperament can be used to describe by a caregiver to basically talk about how those kids are soothing themselves, right? How sociable they are. We use that phrase to illustrate how happy a baby might be. Okay, just to name a few positive attributes when it comes to infants and their personalities and personal characteristics. An example of another example of a personal characteristic that we would rate in the 0 to 5 child strengths domain would be curiosity. So why do we think that curiosity is relevant to strengths for this age group, for the 0 to 5 age group? Not a rhetorical question. You can sort of take a stab at that question in the chat box. Why is curiosity relevant to strength for the 0 to 5 age group? Any ideas about curiosity? Any ideas about how you find evidence of curiosity in young children? Curiosity leads to learning. Thank you, Aaron. Absolutely. Curiosity leads to learning. Now, what does that look like for a younger kid? Can you describe what learning might look like? It's how they learn. It's how they watch their play. It is such a significant time of development and learning. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Rebecca. Absolutely. Interest in toys and books. Yes. So interest in toys and books is indicative of curiosity for this age group. So curiosity is an internal strength. Okay. Strengths can also be categorized as environmental characteristics, not just personal characteristics, but environmental characteristics. And these are elements that are external to the child. Okay. So a part of their surroundings or their environment, or the environment that the child is interacting with, or an environment that might impact them significantly in some way. It's really important to identify strengths that exist in the external environments, which, when presented, are useful as supports for healthy development for this age group. An example of an external environmental characteristic for a kid in this age group might be, on this tool, would be family of origin. So what about family origin? Same question. Would an existing strength look like for a kid that's age 0 to 5? Think about family of origin and how that might be illustrated or depicted as a strength for this age group. The same way we sort of thought about curiosity. We want to come at it from the same lens. Why might family of origin be a strength? What does that look like for a kid? A 0 or a 1? Where do we formulate our where are our most solid relationships, right? When we're young. What do we learn? There we go. Excuse me. Thank you, Rebecca. Stable, loving, interactive family. Absolutely. So that's indicative of how family of origin might be a strength, right? Represents stability, represents loving relationships, compassion, right? Family provides opportunity for learning. I'll tell you, my 2-year-old is really, really comfortable doing things within the family dynamic that he probably wouldn't do outside of the home in other groups because of his comfort level, because of his comfort with his family. He's uncharacteristically different when outside of the home environment. And so we got some really good examples. Excellent. So why do we focus on strengths in the first place? Why are strengths important? Basically, the bottom line in terms of strengths is that they can help, right? Strengths can help. They can help. What can they help with? They can help enhance healthy development. They can be used to resolve. They can also be used to resolve any areas that we've identified as need areas. So children with known strengths tend to function much better even when needs are present, as opposed to kids that that don't have any strengths or that don't have any needs yet identified. Okay. So in recent decades, there's been a lot of research that's focused on early childhood development and learning. And it's been providing a fundamental importance. It's been providing a fundamental idea about the importance of the first 5 years of a kid's life. Okay. The more critical attention that we pay toward the first 3 years of that person's life will foundationally shape the future health and well-being, as well as the development and achievement in various life domains for that child. So picture in your mind a young toddler, maybe 12, 15 months old, and think about what typical developmental milestones would look like for that kid. And think about what those milestones would indicate about that person. Most of the time, 12 to 15 months, we're talking pre-verbal, right? Somewhere on the path of being mobile, they're on their way to walking. Some independence, not incredibly independent at that point. They're capable of communicating. They're capable of letting us know what their wants are, letting us know what their needs are. They're capable of showing affection and demonstrating cognitive skills. And what would that look like? Cognitive skills for this age group in that developmental framework would probably be maybe choosing preferred toys, or making decisions about which toys they want to play with and which ones they prefer not to. So at this stage in the game, in terms of early childhood and development, the child is learning more quickly than any other time in their life. Okay, and this isn't something that we created. This is a quote from a published resource at unicef.org. That resource is entitled Facts for Life, and it basically says that young children grow, they learn, and they develop rapidly when they receive love, affection, attention, encouragement, and mental stimulation, as well as nutritious meals and good health overall, right? Our basic needs have to be met in order for us to advance through our emotional and developmental needs. So the child strengths domain on the CANS provides an opportunity for us to identify the existence of some of these important external characteristics associated with the child's rapid and healthy development. This could look like strengths in family of origin that we've already discussed. That's one of the items. It could look like strengths in foster family. It could look like strengths in residential stability. And we should leverage these strengths when they're present. Why should we do that? We should be building on that plan of care around these strength variables and show evidence of shaping the kid's future, right? Their future successes can depend on the strengths that we've been able to pull to the surface. The fact of the matter is, when we are finished working with these young people, they're going to still likely retain the strengths, the talents, and the interests that they had before we ever met them. And so if they can use those strengths and inject them into addressing their needs, they're in a better position than not. And so we want to honor those strengths in that way. Gathering information for this age group is really, really important. So what are some strategies that you all use for gathering information for our 0 to 5-year-olds? What do you do when you're gathering information for your CANs? Amanda, thank you so much. Your volume is a little low. Can you do that? Can you say that again?
Okay, I work on 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, I'll send you the confirmation. Yeah.
Oh, it looks like Amanda is not speaking. Nicole, did you have something? What do you do to gather information for this age group? All right. Mute. There we go. Let's see why I can't do that. All right, looks like I was able to mute folks that did not know that they were unmuted. So caregivers, relatives, service providers, early educators are primary resources for hearing descriptions of external strengths and positive characteristics about young children. So this is one reliable way that you can gather information and rate the child's strengths for this age group. We don't have enough information from sources to either identify or rule out evidence of these characteristics, but we could look at play as one thing that's typical, right? So if you want to gather evidence and you want to gather information about young child's strengths, we're either going to engage with them simply by playing, doing some play activities, or observing them while they play. So you can find evidence of curiosity in this way. When a baby manipulates a toy, puts it in their mouth, and they have they're working with the tactile and textured side of a toy, or when the toy's dropped, you might want to observe the reaction. Do they quickly adapt when you give them a replacement toy, or do they persist by seeking out the toy that they dropped in the first place? We're going to watch for socialization, positive affect, strengths exhibited in a way that for an infant, they might smile, right? They might laugh. They may or may not maintain eye contact. They could mirror your expressions. We wouldn't rate these strengths as present or useful if a child was demonstrably upset with a new face. So if you show a new face and the kid really gets upset, this has happened to me with young children where I scare the bejesus out of them. And so we wouldn't rate that as useful. If they're easily startled, we wouldn't rate that as useful. That's not something that's going to be helpful in terms of gathering information for describing their strengths. If they're avoiding or uninterested in engaging with other people, excuse the fire truck. I live near a firehouse and this is constant. All right. So those are some things that you can think about for gathering information or seeing strengths with an infant. In terms of looking at or identifying strengths with a younger kid that's not an infant, maybe 4 or 5 years old, we think about playing a game together with some simple rules, such as a basic preschool board game. That can be a great opportunity for you to witness or evidence some of their strengths. Notice their curiosity. Okay, so believe it or not, attempting to cheat or somehow get a winning advantage in a game for a kid is a sign of curiosity and cognitive fluidity, right? If a kid is legitimately thinking about how to get ahead in the game, it's showing us something. They're generally curious. If I think about adaptability, and these are obviously items on your cans: curiosity, adaptability. What is the reaction if you suggest a rule change the second time you play a game? How are they going to adapt? Are they going to be verbal in that adaptation? Are they going to, sort of push back on it? That tells us a little bit about who they are and their strengths. If I think about persistence, what if a kid doesn't win that game? Are they willing to try to play that game again? Or if they do win, are they motivated to continue playing and continue winning? Will they stay engaged? This is indicative of their social relationships, which is an item on the cans. So the day-to-day stuff, the ins and outs, the basic conversations and observations that you have can really speak volumes about the strengths that this age group might have. Think about babies, toddlers, preschoolers. They're usually quick to read, right? Because their behaviors are pretty natural and they're genuine reactions. And their interactions are, in many cases, unrehearsed. There's a show on TV, kids say the darndest things, right? So how do we take advantage of that, right? So questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas thus far? Paola, no questions? Let's see. I just want to check to make sure we're all on the same page here. All right, so we're going to take a look specifically at the child strengths domain items, okay? We're going to look at the items and explore them. So next slide. So there are 8 items in this domain for this age group that are specifically designed to highlight the identified strengths that can be used in the planning process. Some of these items may look familiar to you from the 6 to 21 version, but as I noted earlier, the items describe personal and environmental assets, as well as resources that can support and facilitate healthy development for this age group. Strengths can be used to support growth as well as their well-being, but they can also be used in a way that helps the team, the interdisciplinary team, to address some of the identified needs. We want to think about every strength as a potential pivot point for the youth and for the family. So this domain is really asking us to flesh out the talents, the interests, and the strengths that have the potential to be a natural catalyst for success in that child's life or in that family's life long after we're finished with the program, which is kind of what I illustrated a little bit earlier. So for example, a strength in, let's say, social relationships may be useful as a springboard for future success. If let's say social relationships was a centerpiece strength and they're really, really solid in this area, clearly we want to use their social relationships and their abilities to interact with people in a positive way and inject that into other aspects of their life. So when you specifically highlight the item, you'll see number 33 has an asterisk next to it, curiosity. We'll continue to go back to curiosity as well as family of origin here and there throughout our presentation. There's a reason for that. But if you look specifically at curiosity, this is an item that's describing how we use a strength to really pivot for a family, right? Pivot for a kid. Curiosity describes the kid's eagerness or their desire to know. Basically, we're talking about inquisition, right? They're inquisitive. They might be hands-on and they might tinker with things, and that's a positive thing. We want to use that to our advantage. The desire to know and explore is incredibly useful in many developmental areas of a kid's life. It can be used in planning. It could be used in conversations. It can be used in, a number of different areas when we're talking about getting this young person putting them in a better position in terms of their wellness. So if the child rates a 0 or a 1 for curiosity, we want to use that eagerness. We want to use that inquisition, their inquisitive nature, and develop attainable goals and objectives that utilizes that centerpiece as a tool. So a 0, what does a 0 look like? What does a centerpiece strength look like for curiosity for a kid in this age group? Well, this is a kid that's exceptionally curious about things. Older kids in this in the infantile range, they might crawl, they might walk towards objects of interest. Infants might display mouthing or banging objects together within their grasp as they display some curiosity, right? So that would be a centerpiece, a 0 for curiosity. A useful strength, a 1 for curiosity in infants and in toddlers would be a child that is generally inquisitive, right? Not incredibly inquisitive. They don't crawl, they don't walk towards objects of interest, but they are actively exploring objects when they're presented with those objects, okay? So that 0, the differentiation between the 0 and 1, that 0 might be a toddler or an infant that goes towards that object of interest, whereas the 1 would be a toddler or infant that you can simply give them the object and they'll be generally interested in it, but they're not moving towards it. So infants would not be hesitant or reluctant for this 1 to explore the objects. And older kids in this age group would not be hesitant or reluctant to explore environments as well, right? So there's generally a capacity of interest, right? A capacity to explore and a capacity to know, and that's obviously indicative of their interest. So let's compare and contrast. A lot of folks on the call are here with experience for the 6 to 21 version of the tool. So there are a few items on the 0 to 5 version that look very similar to the 6 to 21 version or that are identical. I want you to consider the work that you do with children and how you tell their stories, right? How do you capture their strengths? I'll give you a fictitious scenario. Let's consider a child, let's call him Ricky. You're working with Ricky for a while, and so I want you to picture Ricky in your own mind. You decide how old Ricky is. Ricky could be 3, Ricky could be 4, Ricky could be 27 months. It really doesn't matter. I want you to visualize what this kid might look like. So if you need to, in order to visualize or imagine this, you can close your eyes or not close your eyes. Ricky has a centerpiece strength of social relationships. All of the collaborative feedback that you receive, as you know, the documentation that you read, the observations that you have on your own, clearly support a rating of a 0 for Ricky, right? So that's a huge strength in terms of his, let's say, social relationships. A 0 for social relationships. Imagine stories that Ricky's caregivers and teachers might tell you. Imagine the last time you spent some time with Ricky. What did you experience that provided support for this strength? So I'm asking you to think about Ricky being your client, and he has a 0, a centerpiece strength for social relationships. If you can, I want you to tell me what that might look like, what some strengths might look like for social relationships for your version of Ricky. Okay, so I want you to open your eyes if you close them and tell us what you think centerpiece strength would be for Ricky for social relationships. What would that look like? First, tell us how old your Ricky is and what those strengths look like for him or her. So if I don't have any takers, I will call on someone. Let's see. Don't be shy. There are 23 of us here. How about, okay. Thank you, Andrea. So how old is your Ricky, Andrea? How old is your Ricky? 2-year-old Ricky. So 2-year-old Ricky might be interactive, playful, gives eye contact, right? Very talkative. Excellent. Gives eye contact, very, very talkative. Rebecca says Ricky's 2. He runs around the room interacting with his parents. He makes eye contact with smiles. Now, Rebecca, how would we take that and use those details to our advantage when planning for Ricky? How might we use these details that you've illustrated as a zero centerpiece for Ricky? How might we use it?
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically for Ricky, because he's 2, I would utilize his parents, families, that are with him daily, frequently, to work on the areas that he needs to improve on. I probably would do training with them and make it more like even just play training.
Absolutely.
As a way to encourage them to work with him.
Right, right. One more Ricky, and then we'll move forward. One more Ricky. So Barry says smiling and greeting me verbally. I imagine Ricky as 3 years old shows me their toys. Excellent. So if you think about Rebecca's Ricky versus Barry's Ricky, there could be some similarities, but there could also be some differences in terms of how we might approach that kid, right? Think about it in terms of 6 to 21. Rebecca says he runs around the room interacting with parents, makes eye contact. Ricky could be a different kid with different attributes that put him in a 0 if he were 6 to 21, right? If his age was much older than 2 years old. And so what I want to do, what I'm trying to do here is show you basically the fact that there's a difference in your approach. There's a difference in the behaviors that you see depending on their age. Their developmental health and overall well-being obviously is going to be dependent upon how they function in the environments that they're in. Okay, very good stuff. I appreciate the feedback. So let's keep moving. So action levels for child strengths domain. We're going to quickly just walk through and remind you all what they are. Remember that action levels for strengths are different from the action levels for needs. All of the items are rated through a lens of action, and we're going to review what these strengths action levels look like. So the very first one, 0. 0 is a strength, a centerpiece strength. It's a well-developed strength. It's a focal positive where the child can actively draw upon those supports for healthy development and overall well-being. This type of strength is central to planning, right? So this is something that you're going to be able to use right now in your plan of care. We're going to plug it in. It's something that is evident to everyone that's on that interdisciplinary team. An example, okay? So I'll give you an example within the context of this age group. So an example of that, let's say we're working with a 2-year-old. Well, actually, you know what? Let's go back and call him Ricky. Ricky attends daycare full-time, and he easily separates from his parents at drop-off time, okay? So Ricky has a fairly easygoing temperament, and he engages with other kids at the daycare very well. If a toy is grabbed out of Ricky's hands by a classmate, Ricky will simply reach for something else to play with. At mealtime or at potty time, Ricky easily follows verbal and nonverbal prompts. Ricky's happy and sought out by other children at the daycare, specifically during story time. The internal characteristics of this kid, of Ricky, are strengths to use for healthy development in all domains. Okay, so these are centerpiece strengths that we can incorporate into the plan of care for developing the social skills, developing peer friendships for Ricky, ensuring basic needs are met by the caregivers, engaging with people about the objects around them and the things that we can do to increase learning and growth. Okay, so what I just described for you are centerpieces for social relationships as well as Ricky's adaptability. A 1 is an identified strength. It's identified as useful. The strength exists. It can be used in planning. However, it is not as powerful as a centerpiece strength at this point in time, but it's something that we can use. Okay, so an example might be family of origin. This is going to be item 28 within your reference guide. I believe it's the very first item in this domain. So for a toddler, let's say Ricky's a toddler. Ricky's mother's single. She only parent, works long hours. She enjoys her job. She works very hard to pay for the rent. She can barely afford daycare. but she pays for it. She gets the bill paid, and she also goes to work. But on weekends, she gets together at the library, spends some time reading lots of books with Ricky. There's a positive and supportive relationship that exists between the two of them, the mom and Ricky. The mom is devoted and she's connected to Ricky, and it's clearly identified. It can be incredibly useful in care planning. Okay, so there are some gaps in making family of origin a centerpiece there, right? Mom works a lot. There are, she's not always there. She spends time on the weekend to try to catch up and reorient and continue to build and develop with Ricky. But that's not necessarily going to put us over the hump and make it a centerpiece strength at this point. However, it is useful for us to have that incorporated in our plan of care. A 2 is a strength that has been identified but not currently in use. So this is something that is on the table. We see it. We can't use it at this point in time. Maybe we can build that strength up. And a 3 would be no strength identified. This is some significant work or discovery needs to happen in order for us to identify it as a strength. So obviously 2s and 3s on the strengths in the strengths domain would not be used in the plan of care in the same way that your 0s and 1s would be. So your 0s and 1s, you would be working towards actively injecting that into the work. And the 2s and 3s we're going to try to build and discover on. Okay, questions so far? All right, so I'm going to very quickly walk through assessing for strengths. And so this is what it could look like. Asking yourself, it's a decision tree or flow chart that is available at our website, KinsNewYorkInstitute.org. And I'll go through that in a couple more slides. Is there evidence of a strength in this particular area? If the answer to that question is no, then we're going to rate the item as a 3, no strength identified. If the answer to that question is a potential strength, maybe, then we're going to rate that as a 2, right? Maybe we can use this as a strength. So strength has been identified, but it's not useful at this point in time. So that's what a 2 would look like. And if the answer to that question, is there a strength evident in this particular area for this item? If the answer to that was a yes, then obviously we're going to use that to our advantage, to the family's advantage. Is the strength, are we going to be able to use the strength in planning? If the answer to that question is yes, we're going to gauge whether or not it's a centerpiece strength or if it's simply useful. If it's a centerpiece strength, obviously we're going to land on a 0. If it's not a centerpiece strength, it's a useful strength, we're going to land on a 1. Okay, so that's the very simple way of sort of looking at what this looks like. And again, you can visit www.kansnyinstitute.org to get a PDF of this flow chart, get a PDF of that decision tree. I find in our feedback with folks across the state, it's been very, very helpful. So take the time and explore what that looks like. It's a cheat sheet, have it at your desk. I know a lot of folks are going back to the office at this point. So try to get as many resources as possible. So I said earlier that we would illustrate, demonstrate, and then practice. Here comes our practice. We're going to look at a practice vignette. Young man named Mason. So I want you to think about what Mason's strengths might be as I'm reading through this vignette, okay? Mason is a 4-year-old boy living with his biological mother. The identity of Mason's father is unknown. Mason has 2 siblings that are much older than he is. His brother is 17 and his sister is 15. Mason gets along well with his sister, but does not get along well with the brother, who finds him annoying. Mason's mother is frequently frustrated because he refuses to follow directions. Mason currently attends a preschool in his neighborhood. Mason has frequent episodes of crying and screaming and has difficulty soothing himself when he's upset. Mason displays interpersonal skills when he's playing with other children one-on-one, but he resists playing in larger groups. When he's playing with a classmate one-on-one, he has a broad imagination. He invents games and explores new toys. Mason has difficulty adjusting to change in activities, even with the support of his preschool teacher. Mason is usually well behaved at home, but will throw tantrums when he's tired and hungry. Okay, so now I'll ask a couple of different questions. Please interact either in the chat box or by unmuting yourself and speaking, and I'll hear your beautiful voice. Does this paragraph about Mason indicate any strengths? Does Mason have any strengths based on what we see? Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate your interaction here. Yes, he's imaginative and invents games. Absolutely. Tiffany, can you elaborate on why you say yes, you see some strengths? And what are those strengths that you might see for Mason? Interpersonal skills, imaginative. He plays one-on-one. Thank you, Nicole, Paula, Aaron. Strength on a one-on-one basis. Annie, yes, he is well behaved at home. Tantrums when tired and hungry could be age appropriate, but that's a good point. His ability to engage with peers. Excellent. So based on the strengths that you guys are identifying for Mason, are there any strengths here that you would say are a centerpiece strength for him? Something you can use today that you would absolutely use in the plan of care. All right, you've identified a lot of strengths. What could we use to our advantage as a centerpiece, if anything? Okay, curiosity. Anything else? All right, so let's look at what our national team, Mason is a vignette that our national TCOM team has sort of vetted over time. We decided to use this vignette here for the purposes that we're using it at the moment. And so let's look at what those recommended ratings are. Okay, Nicole says relationship with sister and mom. Amanda says, yes, good relationship with sister. Okay, I don't disagree with that. So this is how the collaborative ratings ended up with our TCOM national team. So family of origin would be a 2, gets along well with his sister, but not the mother and brother. So there's a useful strength there, right? We can't use it yet in planning, but there's potential. We're gonna build upon that. Social relationships, we would rate that as a 1. A 1 means that it's useful. We can use it in planning right now. It's not as powerful as a centerpiece. We rate that as a 1 because when he's playing one-on-one, he's imaginative. He's exploring his imagination and the environment that he's in the moment. So social relationships would be a 1. Relationship stability would absolutely be a 0. Stable relationship with his mom, right? And at least 1 sibling. So we're going to use that to our advantage. Optimism and positive affect. The vignette doesn't speak about optimism and positive affect at all. There's no evidence of a strength in that area. A couple of folks in the chat box landed on curiosity as a centerpiece. This is close to a centerpiece. The national team rated it as the 1. Mason is imaginative. He explores. This is useful and could be useful in a daycare setting, right? Adaptability and as well as persistent were chosen as no strength, right? There's no strength that really is described in terms of adaptability. Mason has difficulties adjusting to change in activities, even with the support of a preschool teacher, right? So that indicates that his adjustment, his ability to adapt isn't where we would label it as a strength yet. Persistence, there's nothing that indicates that he's persistent. What exactly is persistence looking for? It's looking for the act of persevering and working towards accomplishing tasks or activities, okay? And so we don't see that with Mason at this point in time. Any questions, concerns, or disagreements with these ratings? Okay, so I'm assuming that means this kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? Like at the very least that it's, okay. Thank you, Nicole. Questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas before we jump into quick rating tips? Thoughts, elaborations? Barry, do you have anything that you would like to add? If not, that's okay. Okay. All right, so we'll
Sorry,
jump.
trying to unmute.
Oh, go for it.
No, great. I'm interested if there are questions about anything. So maybe if anyone does, I just continue to invite them to ask that, whether it's now or before we end.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so quick rating tips. So some tips, some tricks, some strategies that you might be able to use when we're thinking about rating these kids. The very first tip that we think is probably really important for you is to use the reference guide. So when rating, it's going to be really helpful to use the reference guide. Why? because within the reference guide, you'll find the item definition. So right on the middle of the screen in the blue area is family of origin, and the item definition is next to it. This item describes the degree to which positive and supportive relationships exist within a family of origin. However, the family defines it may include extended family members as well as child's inclusive in family activities. Do not rate foster family here. Okay, so the definition aims to provide some clarity for you about the parameters for rating that specified item. So reviewing the definitions will enhance your understanding of each item. There's no way possible that you'll remember the definition for every single item on the tool, right? And so we would encourage you to not take that approach and actually use the reference guide to help you in that process. I'll use the example of social relationships. I might have my own internal, definition of what social relationships is that could differ from Tiffany's or differ from Andrea's definition of what social relationships is all about. We don't want that kind of inconsistency. We want you to follow the same exact definition so you have a really good idea about the parameters for the items that you're reviewing. So social relationships is describing the child's ability to make and maintain positive relationships with people other than their primary caregivers. Okay. So if I jump back up to the definition in the blue box, the family of origin, the family can be, I want to point out that the family can be however the family defines it, right? Their family is who they say their family is. It might include extended family. Keep in mind that family of origin is based on how families see themselves. This could be kinship families. This could be aunts, uncles, adopted family. It's not how we as care managers see a family or how see the family or how staff defines their family structure. It's about how they see it. It also states at the bottom there, you'll see, do not rate foster family here. Now, if we don't have the reference guide and we're not using the reference guide to help narrow the parameters of the items that we're looking at, we could just, we could be rating in error because we don't understand what's being looked at or asked for rather. So the details within the item definition are critical to successful rating, okay? They'll make it easier for you to work with the tool, and the information will help you determine the level of a strength for each and every item that you're exploring. The description language and the domains. So the description language you can find on pages 7 and 8 in that reference guide. And so, you want to definitely make sure that you're using the reference guide, not only for the strengths, but for the needs as well. It's really important to have that. So next tip, strength-based approach. We're pretty familiar with that language, right? So professionals in the field, as professionals in the field, we're taught to encourage and take a strength-based approach. Sometimes that can feel like it's rhetorical. When you're working with caregivers or a young person identifying or discussing or celebrating their strengths, it's going to be helpful to think about what their strengths mean to them, right? And how we phrase their strengths and how we put that stuff together in our writing, in the language that we use. So, you want to be conscious of the terminology in our approach. Focusing on strengths and supports with engagement with the family and a young child can go a long way, right? I see, we put a young lady here who's wearing a cape, right? Superhero. Like we want to pull those strengths to the surface. Parents boasting about their offspring is something that happens all the time. So, but I think it's pretty rare from a systems approach when the system brags or boasts about their kid. Like that's something that sort of sets people back a little bit. Wow, you think that about my kid, right? So it's really important to take that kind of an approach. It's going to be beneficial for the work in the long run. Okay, so let's say, for example, a first-time mother. You meet with a first-time mother. She's exhausted for caring for a 3-month-old, and she's caring for this kid around the clock. She jumps up nervously when the baby begins to cry across the room, apologizes for interruptions and doubting herself as a mother because she can't yet figure out why the baby's crying so much. So over the next few moments, obviously I'm putting you in a position where you're sort of working with this mom and this infant in this family. And so in that scenario, the mom is apologetic and she's sort of trying to figure out how to best interact with you without you judging her in terms of being a poor mom. So over the next few minutes, you watch and engage with this mom and this baby and enthusiastically share your strengths observations, right? You share what it is that you see that's going well for this mom. The baby calmed very quickly upon you picking the baby up. You notice that there's strong eye contact with one another. When you leaned over to say hello to the baby, if you illustrate some of these strengths, it's going to put them in a different position, right? So we're asking you to be deliberate about illustrating the things that are going well for a family. You want to identify if those strengths can be used in care planning as well, right? So, it's not just about what it is that we see. It's about what we see and what we're able to illustrate for other people, right? All of this work is iterative, and we're constantly, us as well as the families that we work with, we're constantly evolving in the moment based upon all of the impactors, based upon all of the things that are happening around us. So we want you to be deliberate in illustrating the strengths that you see as they come to the surface. So that's tip number 2. Frame the strengths as opportunities to challenge or resolve needs. Tip number 3, absence of a strength is not a need. It's really, really important for us to really understand that the absence of a strength doesn't necessarily mean that there's a need. So let's say, I'll just pick a strength here. Let's say I'll go with optimism and positive affect. For Mason had a 3 for optimism and positive affect. Just because Mason had a 3 for optimism and positive affect doesn't mean that that's a need, right? You may have a child that doesn't frequently laugh, doesn't frequently smile, or really seems to enjoy themselves or display any positive affect. This information would likely result in a 3. If you were to connect a negative connotation or bad to that 3, then you're going to be doing that family, that child, a disservice. And so we have to watch how we value and how we incorporate the ratings. Just because it's a 3 doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. The 3 simply means that there's not enough known strength in that particular area. It also means that we should be discussing with the team the potential benefits of building that potential strength and optimism and positive affect. The discussion should feel different than your discussions about needs. Okay, so it's about building people up, not about addressing an issue. So if I take the same approach and we looked at, let's say, relationship stability, you might work with a kid that has stable relationships with the caregiver. That's going to likely remain stable for the foreseeable future. This information would likely result in a rating of a 1, right? If a kid is really invested and in a stable environment, we're going to use that to our advantage. We're going to use that in the plan. But it does not necessarily mean that the child or caregiver and their relationship is absolutely perfect. They might have some areas of difficulty in their relationship. Maybe it's verbal, maybe it's not verbal. They're not it's not a centerpiece strength. It's just a 1. So how do you separate conversations about needs and strengths? We have to be able to discuss the positive aspects and what's useful without having a simultaneous discussion about whether it's negative or not, right? And so I want to check for understanding with this concept. So questions about it. So this tip, we're telling you that just because the strength isn't there doesn't mean that it's a need. Remember that strengths and needs are absolutely separate from one another, and they inform the plan of care differently. Questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas. Rebecca, do you have anything? You're always my go-to. You're so invested in this process, and I appreciate you. Others. Nicole. Okay. You want to avoid framing needs that require interventions. So no questions. The floor is open. I was basically able to get you all through the content that we have. As a reminder, there are 4 regional leads across the state of New York, representing the 4 regions that are illustrated on this map: the Western region, the Capital region, the Hudson Valley region, as well as the New York City, Long Island region. If you need anything in terms of assistance, please reach out. These email addresses are here for you. I'm on that email list as well. No, that makes sense to me. Everyone is different, and they have excellent. Thank you, Barry. Thank you. So again, thank you guys for hanging out. CANS New York, institute.org. Please utilize the resources that we have available. There are tons of free resources, decision trees, flowcharts, etc. Before you run, what I would like to do, I would like to place an evaluation into the chat box. If you can take a minute or two to describe for us the information and the process that we just went through in this last hour on our evaluation, that would be great.